Welcome to a live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor. They just keep on coming. It is the podcast that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime. Do you guys remember a guy named Alex Murdaugh? Yeah, he is back in the news yet again. The man who just won't go away. Now turns out that the Supreme Court of South Carolina is going to hear his appeal for a possible new murder trial. Oy vey, as they say in South Carolina. Can we all handle this? I don't know. But we're about to find out. And the only silver lining here is I am reunited with three of my favorite best guests who always bring the energy, the charm, and Amy Lawrence Lovely, the F-bombs, to the podcast. So without further ado, starting bottom right corner with the cool new glasses, Sarah Ford. She has served as legal director at the South Carolina Victim Assistance Network since 2017. She leads a team of attorneys and advocates to provide direct legal services to South Carolina crime victims. She is a former South Carolina prosecutor and has hosted a bunch of different podcasts that I can't keep up with. Are you on a pod? Are you doing a podcast these days, Sarah?
I'm on a hiatus. Can I say that? I'm on a hiatus from stepping toward justice. Life gets so busy, but like, I've got all of your podcasts is made. I have so many shows that I keep up with. So I'm on a hiatus right now, but thanks for the plug.
Yeah. Well, you have a quote unquote real job. So there you go. And I don't. Amy Lawrence Lovely. She fights for the civil rights of the wrongfully accused every day in her practice at the Lovely Law Firm. And I saw on the social medias, she has two adorable kids who started school. Did they just start this week, Amy?
We are back in full swing. I needed one more week of summer. They were denying it to me, but all is well and everybody's excited to be back.
There you go. My kids are all back as of yesterday, and they were exhausted last night, but it's all going
Everybody's
well.
sleeping real good.
Yes, they sure are. They sure are. Last but certainly not least, Amy Zimmerchak. She is the owner of AGZ Law Firm, LLC. She's focusing her practice on criminal defense, and she's been voted as a member of Super Lawyers continuously since 2019. She's had over 10 not guilties on felony cases, including murder and rape going back to 2009. And Amy, you've got a big case next week. Can you give us a little hint at what's going on in your world?
Yes, got a murder trial starting on Monday.
And you, who normally works like 21 hours a day, are you now working 23 hours a day?
Close to 23 and 3/4. I did squeeze a little nap in.
How do you not burn out? I want to know. What is your superpower?
Honestly, I just love it. I love it. Yeah. And I mean, even I was laughing today. I had court in Greenwood, which is about an hour from here, but there's really no good way to get to it. And somebody called me and I was like, man, I'm listening to a podcast. And it was a true crime podcast. So, they're like, what? This is your life. And I'm like, I love it. So
well, there you go, kids. There's a life lesson. If you're very passionate about what you do, doesn't feel like a job, and you too can work 23 and a half hours a day. So let's just get everyone caught up real quick. It's been a while since the three of us talked, and then I will let the power women unleash. And you guys, please, if you have questions for us about, look at this, Becky Ireland, right as I said it, great female powered panel. Welcome, ladies, and there is alliteration in there. And then we've got Rome Kyers. First time I'm seeing the name. Good evening from England, lest you think it is not an international show. We are, by the way, doing Shanna Gardner tomorrow, eerily similar to the Dan Markel Adelson case in Tallahassee. This one's in Jacksonville. We had to adjust the time because of trying to get the best guests for that. So I think we're doing a 2:30 in the afternoon, which is very rare for us tomorrow. And Carm will be here, giving us her therapeutic insight into what's going on in yet another murder for hire trial. But it's hard to believe it's been more than a year since the double murder trial of Alex Murdaugh. But now it's possible he can get a new murder trial. As you'll recall, he basically completely tarnished and ruined his family dynasty's name. He was convicted of the double killing of his son and wife, Maggie and Paul. He also pleaded guilty to state and federal charges related to a decade-plus financial fraud scheme, and he's trying to wiggle his way out of the sentencing for that. We'll get to that as well. But he continues to deny that he killed his family. He had put in for a request for a new trial with former Supreme Court Justice Jean Toll. That was denied. But the real headline now that we're going to dive into is the Supreme Court of South Carolina said, we are going to hear what you have to say, Mr. Murdaugh. So they're going to hear his case. Before we get to that, Amy Lawrence Lovely, during the height of all this, I know you couldn't go 2 feet without, talking to other lawyers about the case, about the insanity surrounding it. Have things died down? Is it much quieter now as it pertains to Alex Murdaugh?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we thought we kind of put it to bed. We knew he wasn't ever going to be out of sight, out of mind, but it kind of has felt like we've got a break from it. Other things, I'm like obsessed with the YSL case in Atlanta and watching that. It's just another train wreck that's just enjoyable from a lawyer point of view. I'm sure it's probably enjoyable from like a layperson point of view too, but other things have kind of taken precedent. Our own cases. I've been watching Amy Z trial her murder cases and kick some butt and take some names. And so it's kind of like went to bed a little bit. So now that all this is coming up, everybody's starting to rustle. Everybody's starting to talk. We're going in there like, what do you think's going to happen? What do you think's going to happen? I'm like, I think they're going to uphold it at all costs is what I think. We'll get into more of that. I'm sure Amy Z will give you her two and Sarah. But I think they're going to uphold it. But everybody's starting to whisper now. We're all getting back in the groove of like, what do you think's going to go down?
That's interesting because from what I was reading, I kind of got the feeling that we are going to see a second trial, but we will talk about it. Most important question of the day: what is your pup's name, Sarah Ford, and is it a boy or a girl?
This is Louis.
I was going to say he looks handsome. Yeah.
Thank you. His brother is playing with a bone over there, Lex. But yeah, my boys are out tonight, so sorry if they.
Louis, like welcome. We are a dog-friendly show. I'm actually so I've got Fred and Ethel. Ethel's a 3-year. This is where people now send me hate mail. I don't give a crap about your dogs. It's supposed to be a true crime podcast. Why aren't you talking about true crime? Well, let me tell you about Fred. By the way, Fred and Ethel are on Instagram. Fred Ethel STS. But Ethel's a giant boxer. Fred is a smaller than average pug. Fred is the pug. And I have this fantasy. One half of it, I've actually lived out the fantasy. I got him a giant gold chain. So he's rocking a gold chain, and I want to get him like a cool hat or something. And I want him to go everywhere with me. The only problem is he's obsessed with food. Like he'll literally, like if I ever brought him anywhere near food, he'll dive on the table, and I just don't know how to control him. So maybe he'll just have to stay in the house.
But dogs make us better people, right? At least I think so.
So much better. It's hard to believe. I mean, Sarah, let me go to you. I mean, do you agree with what Amy Lawrence Lovely just said? Do you think that it's going to be upheld, to use lawyerly language, that he's not going to get a new trial?
I do. I think that, some people are like, oh, I didn't realize this was going to happen. And I mentioned to a lawyer that I work with today, she had a hearing and she was like, well, I mean, what if this happens or what if that happens? And I think in the law, everything is quote unquote fixable, or at least we can try to fix it, right? We can appeal, we can ask for a motion to reconsider. There are all sorts of things that can happen. So if this were not going to the South Carolina Supreme Court, I would feel like we had a problem. Now I think a lot of people are like, oh, it's a new trial. No, that is not what this means at all. I think that the chance of that happening is extremely small. But he has appellate rights, and he's going to exercise those. I think it's interesting that his federal sentence, which we're talking about the South Carolina Supreme Court, which is his state charges, which is the murder charge, and of course his federal stuff. He actually made a deal to not appeal his federal stuff, and then what has he done? He's just appealed that. So they're obviously going back and forth on that. And I always hated that as a prosecutor, having someone basically sign their appellate rights away. It just seems unfair to me to do that. I'm sure Amy Z will probably agree with that. But yeah, I don't think anything's going to change. But hey, we're here for the ride.
Yeah, that is for sure. And I also, please remind me at the end, we'll talk about a few other things, including Stephen Smith. I just want to know if you guys have heard anything else about that. Look at this. I just want to show something, point out of how my life goes. South Carolina Snoop says, I like dogs just as much, probably more than true crime. Lindsay Shea, I care about Fred and Ethel. Courtney H, we love all of it, Joel. Haters gonna hate. Lee, ignore any pet haters. The list goes on. Jersey Girl, dogs are the best. And then we get to my mother, who's in the chat. I agree. Stop talking about the dogs. Joelle, stop talking about the dogs.
Carm is just totally roasting you.
Yeah, she is. She doesn't want me talking about anything but true crime, which I refuse to do because otherwise the show would be boring. So I'm talking about more than true crime. By the way, Carm's celebrity is on the rise. She was just written up in the Times of Israel. A lot of people don't know this. I think it's one of the top 3 most widely read international newspapers. So we started getting 1 million text messages from friends because they tweeted it out and put us on their homepage. It's all about Carm being a true crime podcaster at 85. And I said, Carm, what do you think of the article? She said, I like the article, but they could have made me look better. That's the answer that a diva would give. So she wanted a little more praise. But if you haven't checked it out, it's a great article. Shout out to Robert Sarner. We actually interviewed for that back in May. So moving along here. I mean, to you, Amy, AIMEE, do you feel like there's like a blight or a black eye on the state of South Carolina because of this? I mean, do you think that, I don't want to say, are you the butt of jokes, but every time people hear Alex Murdaugh, they're kind of like, oh my God, I cannot believe we're talking about this guy again.
I tell you, before we get there, I want to tell you, I read y'all's book. I got it in the mail a while back. It was so great.
Thank you so much.
I appreciated your mom's humor.
Thank you.
But
hope you don't mind curse words.
South Carolina, I feel like we're at the butt of a lot of jokes for a lot of reasons, but I'll tell you it really hurts to be an attorney and to have that kind of stigma on you. It makes me want to even work so much harder just to make sure that the right things are done. And to be quite honest, I think the Supreme Court's in a precarious position because I do believe that she applied the wrong standard, and it's going to be interesting for me to watch them try to fix the standard that Justice Toll applied, in relation to what the Supreme Court says that the law should, the standard should be, because the state has a very different take on it. So I think that's going to be the nerdy legal, most interesting part of that.
And I'm trying to look all that up right now because I do have the kind of the facts of the legal facts of what you're talking about. And let's get to that right now, I guess. So just Amy Zimmercheck, back to you on this because you just brought it up. So it was Jean Toll. She's the former Supreme Court justice. It's hard to believe. I think that hearing was back in January of this year. So it's amazing how time flies. And her ruling was based on South Carolina legal precedent. She basically interviewed jurors, heard from them. There was the kind of now famous / infamous, I guess, juror Z, who said that she was, in fact, swayed by Becky Hill. We'll get to Becky Hill, too. But it required legally, Amy Zimmercheck, to prove for the Murdaugh defense to prove that not only did Becky Hill, this kind of corrupt clerk of court, that she acted improperly, but that she prejudiced the jurors and influenced their verdict. And Judge Toll didn't feel it met that burden. To a layperson like me, it sort of does if you've got Juror Z coming out and saying, yeah, she influenced me. So why didn't it meet that threshold for the former Supreme Court Justice Toll?
So in South Carolina, they have a case, and I believe it's State v. Green. I was trying to look it up real quick, but I believe it's State v. Green. That deals with when the issue of jury tampering comes up, and then what standard to apply. And so in the Green case, it was a little more innocuous, less innocuous, I would say, because the jury was hung, and one of the jurors asked a bailiff, what will happen if we can't decide? Phoebe, stop. What will happen if we can't decide? And the bailiff correctly said, it'll go to a different jury, it'll be tried again. But this United States Supreme Court case starts with an R. It's on the tip of my tongue right now. But that case says that once there is an accusation of jury tampering, then the burden becomes the state's burden to prove that it was not that it did not affect the jurors' decisions and things like that. Where in the state precedent for South Carolina, she applied that burden was on the defense side, and not that the burden was on the defense to prove it, and not the state. So that's a very narrow legal issue that I do believe that the Supreme Court's going to have trouble squaring. I think that's going to be the crux of the issue. I know everybody believes what they believe. Either they believe he's guilty, or they believe that he was a part of it, or something. But if it really doesn't matter if the correct standards aren't applied, and if jurors are allowed to be swayed, which that juror clearly said she was swayed, then I just don't see how the court's going to get around it.
Amy, the other Amy Lawrence Lovely. So this, at least legally, means that he's now going to be able to kind of bypass what would be a really lengthy appeals process. Had the Supreme Court of South Carolina said they wouldn't hear this case, what would, Dick Harpootlian and company and Jim Griffin, what would they have to do in terms of going through all these hoops? It's going to make their life easier, isn't it?
Well, if they didn't, it would just go to the next round of appeals. It would go up a level. And they would ask for it to be heard, and if they didn't grant cert, then it'd be dead in the water, essentially. This is my thing. I think that the law is on Murdaugh side, right? I think Amy's spot on. Like, the Supreme Court of the United States has said this is the standard, and they applied the wrong one. The question is I don't think that the Supreme Court wants us to hear this case again. I think they want to put it to bed. They want it to be done. And the question is how are they going to wiggle out of that? Yeah. How are they going to develop this legal theory to support it, to not give him the new trial? That's where, like, the super nerd lawyers are wanting to see how it goes down, because the law's pretty clear in the standard of review that she needed to apply, and Justice Toll, I don't think, got it right. Respect her, love her, like her. I just don't think that that's it. I think that the Supreme Court doesn't want to deal with him anymore. I think everybody just wants him to go away, so everybody can move forward, onward and upward. And I just don't see that happening. I don't think that they want to put it to bed. They're not going to give him what the law probably requires.
And Sarah Ford, I'm covering a couple other cases where things are being appealed to the state Supreme Court. Ellen Greenberg, a woman who was stabbed 20 times, 10 to the back of her head, 2 post-mortem. I mean, absolutely crazy case that's never been investigated, is now going to be just a very small part of the issue is going to be heard by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. When something goes to the Supreme Court, are guys like Griffin and Harpootlian, do they need to bring in, both Amy's talked about sort of the the nerdiness of the law at that level? Do you have to bring in sort of an expert attorney who knows how to, I guess, appeal to a Supreme Court?
Not necessarily. I mean, those guys do that work. You know, it's kind of common, particularly, I mean, for those guys to handle their own appeal. I mean, I got an appeal coming up at the Court of Appeals in September, and you know, I've got an appellate attorney that's sitting with me, but nobody knows that case better than I do. Nobody knows this case better than they do. So that's kind of the mentality, is like, they're not going to hand this off to anybody else to do that. I don't know. You know, some people do, but that's just not my practice. And I don't think that's the general practice of most attorneys that do this work. But, you know, I do want to say that, you know, I respectfully disagree with the Amy's. Love you both, but I disagree. You know, I think that Toll got it right. I think that the standard that she applied was correct. I think that the testimony of that particular juror, and of course we are far removed, and I did not go back and watch that today. But, you know, the testimony of that juror was mixed review at best. It was kind of an in and out, up and down kind of testimony. And so I think that Toll got it right. You know, I do think that it is in everyone's best interest for every person to receive a fair trial, to not have any officers of the court, law enforcement, anyone obviously influencing a jury, influencing witnesses, any sort of intimidation of any kind. So I welcome this opportunity for the Supreme Court to take another look at this, to make sure that Justice Toll got it right. I think she got it right. I think that she will be upheld by the South Carolina Supreme Court. But you know, we'll see. You know, that is the beauty of the law, that, you know, you get that second look, you get the second chance to make sure everybody's doing the right thing.
Yeah. And Amy Zimmercheck, how long is this process generally? I mean, how long do you think before the Supreme Court actually hears this? And then how long after that do they rule on it?
Well, so one thing I can say about our Supreme Court is when issues kind of get plucked out, they tend to do a very good job on not letting them languish. Because I'm a nerd, and every Wednesday the first thing I do when I get a chance is I pull up the advance sheets and I read the decisions. Today I was heartbroken, as usual, but because I have the Uber case on a PCR, so the appeal came out on that today, that it was harmless error. Phoebe, stop. And but what's interesting is, so this appeal is really kind of bifurcated, because the only thing that the Supreme Court took up was this juror issue. And so throughout the regular Court of Appeals is the normal appellate process of the trial. They have some very good lawyers that work for them. Jim has an associate named Maggie Fox. She takes a lot of heat. She's a very pretty woman. She's incredibly smart. And she writes like nobody's business. So I have no doubt that she will be handling the appeal, a lot of it. But what's interesting is that the Supreme Court said, because the lawyers for both the state and the defense tried to say, wait, can we put the Court of Appeals on hold while they're deciding this? And the Supreme Court was like, nope. So they're writing appeal briefs right now on two separate issues for two different courts. I think it's interesting, because the Supreme Court, I think, will make its decision rather quickly. And I think then the question becomes, do they go ahead and appeal interlocutory that portion of it all the way up to the Supreme Court, or do they have to wait for the entire case to be heard? So it's like I said, it's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo, but it's really it's fascinating.
I mean, but for a guy like me who just wants an answer, we talking like, do they hear it in 3 months and we get a ruling in 6 months? How long does it go on for? Is it going to be a year? I heard in the Greenberg case, it's going to be a year before we actually get the ruling. And that's just to show, to rule on whether the parents have standing to ask for change in the manner of death. That's literally all that is just.
So I think that, for example, the case that just came down today, the Uber murder case, That was in the Court of Appeals. We argued that 2 months ago, but that case has been pending for going on 2 years now. So it's, I say typical 2 to 3 years for any appellate case, but on this issue alone, I think it'll be before next July. I think it'll be decided.
By the way, I'm freaking myself out. I'm decorating my studio, and I had to get this. This is my Keith Morrison throw pillow, and he's in the dark on a chair that's dark, and he keeps looking at me, and it's freaking me out. So you can kind of see some of the I've been putting things up here. I'll show everybody. I've been Instagramming out some photos, but got some interesting little true crime trinkets here, I guess is what you'd say. This comment is actually important, which is why I've kept it up, from David Gagamella, who rocks the NJ New Jersey, my home state shirt. Does anybody believe he did not murder his wife and son? I don't think so. Courtney here says, no, David, but I have a hard time figuring out motive. I can understand that, I think, to a degree. And bossy Texas chick here, I think they can safely deny a new trial on this one. Don't think too many people are going to be shouting in the streets that Alex Murdaugh was denied justice. I agree with you on that. But the question here, Amy Lawrence Lovely, at the heart of the appeal, is not really a question of guilt or innocence from a legal perspective. The whole question is, was he fairly denied a new murder trial by former Supreme Court Justice Jean Toll? That's the question. It's not innocence or guilt. Wondering if you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that if a super rich white guy who's a lawyer, super educated, can't get a fair trial, I think this is really what is scary for criminal defense lawyers. If he can't get a fair trial, then how is the poor Black man in Orangeburg going to get that? You know what I mean? I think that's where we all are. We don't give two shits about Alex Murdaugh. If he was on fire, I would piss on him. You know what I mean? Not one tear would be shed if he got shanked in jail. Not making lasagnas for his family if something happens. He's not a good person. He's a horrible human. I have no empathy for him. And that's really hard to say because I have empathy for everybody to like a fault. And I mean, I think we can all feel that. But where our heart is and where we're concerned is if that guy can't get a fair trial, then there's no way then the average guy can, right? And I think that's where it's hitting home for all of us. It's not about Alex Murdaugh at all. It's we've got to preserve the system because that's what we have to hold to the high standard.
Very well.
Amy Z has an appeal, and I'm walking around the grocery store trying to get groceries for my family, so I have something to feed my kids this week for lunch. And we're chit chatting, and we're talking about an appeal that she had. And, it's always harmless error. Oh, yeah, it was an error. It was an error. It was there. But how many harmless errors do we have to get to before it affects the trial? This is like the things that we have to ask all the time. Like, how many errors until they're harmless? And then is there like a threshold? Is it like 10 harmless errors? Is it 5? All these things. These are the things that we're questioning because that's how you get a fair trial. And so we're trying to preserve the system. It's not about Alex Murdaugh at all.
Yeah, it's about the justice system. I forgot how much I love the way Amy Lawrence Lovely says, why? Black Widower here in the Republic of Ireland. Amy Lawrence Lovely. I love her long time. You have a big fan in the Republic of Ireland. I don't know what Amy F word. I got you, Black. Mm-hmm. Black Widower. It always takes me a second to get you.
I love you back.
Love real women. You go, girl. There you go. Sarah Ford, who's always on the side of victims. In this particular instance, if there was a new trial granted, and you're the one being very vocal saying that you think it's going to be upheld, so we'll see. But if there was a new trial granted, does it favor the defense or the state? Before you answer this question, we're going to get to our charges being filed against Miss Becky. She's got a lot of issues going on in her life. We're going to get to that in the back half of this. But who does it favor, the defense or the state?
I think it favors the defense. Because, the state has put everything up. They have said, this is all the evidence that we have, that we are, these are our witnesses. They've seen where witnesses have screwed up. They've seen, all of the physical evidence, everything that's out there. So they're able to see what didn't work the last time and adjust their strategy. So I think it absolutely favors the defense, no question. I think it's more difficult for the state because they've got to, obviously the burden is on the state. They have to prove Alex Murdaugh guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And that was a long ass trial, y'all. I mean, that we do not have trials like that in South Carolina. I mean, that is unheard of. And
by the way, would Creighton Waters, if it happened, would he be the one prosecuting the case again?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, if we get this done, in the next, little while, I mean, not saying that he's going to retire, but like, I mean, in the next 15 years, I would say so for sure. I mean, my gosh. And yes, I do think I'm making a joke, but I do think we will get this handled before then. But yeah, I mean, I would imagine the majority of his team would be back. I mean, it would be chaos to have a whole new prosecution team come in and try to, re-prosecute that case. That would be chaos. But I think it absolutely it gives the defense the edge for sure. Second time around.
When you think about it, I mean, they kicked the door open to so many things. Mm-hmm. Like they just stepped all in the shit. And you're like, oh no, why did they say that? Why did they do that? Like, oh no. Like it was just so bad. They opened the door to all kinds of evidence that should have never come in, but they kicked the door open, and then it was like Pandora's
You're talking about Jim and Dick in the first trial.
Yeah. So I mean, it can only get better for them. It can only get better, right? Yeah,
that's a good point. Courtney H here, to Amy Zimmercheck. Is the Supreme Court going to rule on all the charges on Alec, or is this the murder charges? They're not going to rule on the financial. This is a very narrow scope, correct?
And it's actually, and they're not even, the appeal is not even about the murder trial. The Supreme Court portion of it is very limited to that ruling by Justice Toll. They're not, so the regular appeal is still happening for all of his cases that he was tried upon, so which was the murder and the possession of the weapon. So that is actually being heard by the Court of Appeals. They're not even ruling on the murder trial itself. It's very narrowly tailored to this very one issue about jury tampering.
Yeah.
And to answer your question about Becky, by the way, I think that the state is in a very precarious position right now, because if they do bring charges against Becky, I really think that makes it easier for the Supreme Court to say, well, then we're granting a new trial. So I think that they're in a very precarious position with that.
This is probably the best question ever asked on STS, I would say. I'm going to take a photo of this, actually. What if Keith Morrison has a Joel throw pillow? I'm going to put that out to the social media world and see what the response is. My guess is probably not, but I would be...
But it could happen, Joel.
It could happen. It could. I should send him one, actually. That'd probably be a little presumptuous of me. But if he has a throw pillow of me, I think I just quit everything in life, because it'll never be a greater moment. And I just walk away into the sunset. Send Keith Morrison a Carm t-shirt, and maybe he'll make a post wearing it like he did with East Idaho News. That's actually a great idea. And you know what? I happen to know Keith's producer pretty well, so I could reach out. I've got a little inside track there. I'm trying to get him on the show. One of these years, I will get him on the show. I don't see what a new trial does, but for the media, that's what Brianna is saying. Part of this, Amy Lawrence Lovely. By the way, I was looking at my notes that I had on the whole, Jean Toll hearing, the former Supreme Court justice. She spoke to all of the jurors, the 12th juror that couldn't meet the day of the hearing. So that 12th juror came back, and Judge Toll kind of famously during the end of that hearing assured the jury that they had done nothing wrong. So I think it's really hinging on this juror Z. But getting back to some of these previous questions, and Sherry Wilson, what about the financial crime? Is he ever seeing the light of day no matter what? He's never walking out of a prison, right, Amy?
No. He's a lifer. He's in there forever. He's not going anywhere. It's just whether or not the whole country has to relive this murder trial again.
So Sarah Ford, again from David Gaugamela. I mean, he's in there for life. He knows he is. He's an attorney. The guy's bored. He's not a good person. Do David says he's gaming the system. Is this just a product of now he's got too much time on his hands and he's just going to do every single thing to give South Carolinians a headache?
Yeah. I mean, what else is he going to do? I think that you find that, if I'm sentenced to 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, or whatever it is, and I mean, these are field trips. He's got to go to, Colleton County for this hearing and, Charleston federal court for this hearing. I mean, why would you not, people are all upset that he's reneging on the federal agreement for him not to appeal. And I'm like, what incentive does he have to not do that? Like, why would he stand by that agreement? What are they going to do? Say, let's start all over again? He's like, great, I'll be out for months now. I mean, so there's no incentive for him to not do this. The incentive would be to avoid putting his family and his son through this. But I mean, I don't think that that's a concern on his mind. I mean, I think we've all discussed and seen that. I hate to use the word narcissist, but I mean, I think that seems very clear. I'm a lawyer, not a psychiatrist, but I do think he fits the description for sure. So, I mean, he's going to do whatever he can for the next however many years he's in the South Carolina Department of Corrections to, the system is the system. It's the best system we've got. It's not ideal. And, a lot of times I'm on the side of victims saying this is, we are re-traumatizing victims having to go through hearing after hearing after hearing, but the system is what the system is.
Yeah, I'm curious, like always, about the inside baseball. And Amy Zimmercheck, you probably have a better idea than many about this because your clients oftentimes are in either prison or jail. But what do you think? I mean, what do you think a day in the life is like for Alex Murdaugh right now? If you had to guess.
So glad you asked that. I was actually in prison yesterday.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. They let me out, but no, he's running that place. Let me tell you, he is running that place.
So you were at his prison.
I was.
Wow. Tell us. Come on. Give us the insight.
I mean, just like he did in, so when he was in Albanus Glen, which is the jail in Columbia where they held him, and that place is a disaster. I mean, people are dying at least 2 a day for the last 2 or 3 weeks, or at last 2 a week. 2 a week for the last 2 to 3 weeks. They've had people die in there.
Is that it's just because of violence?
A combination of violence and drugs, and the two that were just on Monday.
Yeah. Hold on, you just opened up a can of worms. I have so many questions. Wait, what's the name of the state prison he's in now? Alec? Are you not allowed to tell me? It's public record, right? I used to know it.
It's in Columbia.
Well, let me ask you this: when you drive in there, is it a scare? Tell me, like, what is it like when you drive in there?
No,
how scary is it?
So the prison system across the state, they're generally spread out. But in Columbia, they have several prisons in kind of the same area. It's like in Florida, how in Stark, how they have like all of those prisons back to back. I don't know why I know about the prisons in Florida, but I do. But I have to drive through them to get to the football games. But so the prisons in Columbia, they have the SVP unit, which is the sexually violent predator unit. They're not going to call that a prison. It's an absolute prison. And then they have all of these other different tier levels of prisons. And so it's not necessarily, I mean, I go all the time. So it's not that scary, but it's interesting. It's just very interesting because going back to what Sarah said about the narcissism that he has. I mean, he is running his own little, he has a side gambling system. He has, they deal with food. And then, he's advising people on appeals and different things like that. I mean, he is living it up in there.
Sexting women on his little iPad, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is crazy. So he's basically like revered in there, is what you're saying.
Oh, absolutely.
And he has a gambling
infamous.
But he's running he's running like a gambling thing, and he's
Well, I
got
mean, like cards and
Ye-
cards and betting and things like that. But I'll tell you, he Alvin Glen is one of the worst state jails that we have, and he was as comfortable as a by the third week in there. He knew all of the trustees. He was getting notes and books and things, and I mean, he adapts so very well that one would think that a lawyer that takes private planes to watch the College World Series would not do well and be able to adapt in prison.
Well, birds
It's
and
like
feathers fly
nothing.
together, Amy.
Yeah, Amy.
Right?
I mean, Amy Lawrence Lovely. What do you attribute this to? Is he just a total psychopath?
Well, I am an expert on narcissists because TikTok has taught me everything I need to know. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah. So let us know. Share.
He is a total sociopath. He is a chameleon. He is who he needs to be to thrive and take care of himself. He is running that joint. I have no doubts. He is getting every perk, everything, and not just from from anybody who can give him anything. He's already like schmoozed them and rolled them.
Hey, Carm, hang on a sec. Carm, if you're in the chat, can you explain to me why, I don't know, 97% of Americans struggle with self-esteem, including myself, and then you got Alex Murdaugh, who murders his family, and he's having a grand old time in prison. I'm barely surviving in a free world. What's going on, Carm? Please let us know in the chat. Go ahead, Amy.
True story. But he's just like a total slime ball who's going to figure out a way to weasel through the system no matter where he is or what he is. We talked about the whole appeals process, but that it's like the natural way we do things. You go to trial, you lose, we file a notice of appeal, and if you have a public defender, it gets assigned to a public defender. This is just kind of what happens. It's just the process. I mean, there are some people who don't appeal things, but it's very, very rare that they don't. And I think also it's ego. It's not just his ego; it's his attorney's ego. It's all of it. It's all playing into the bigger scheme of the circus of the Murdaughs.
Well said, and I agree with that. Sarah Ford, how can anyone not know what his motive was for doing what he did? I mean, there's questions about it. I'm just curious, Sarah Ford, now that we've had all this time to reflect, and motive is basically irrelevant. Bossy Texas chick here weighed in, said motive was to spare Maggie the shame of being poor, theorized he did it out of mercy for her. What do you think it all was about, Sarah Ford?
I feel like we talked about this so much about what the motive was. And I know I've been on your show before, Joel, talking about how people are like, I don't understand how he could do this to his wife and his son. This doesn't make sense. And as someone who works with victims and survivors and has been an attorney in the criminal justice system for going on 2 decades now, it makes absolute sense to me. This is not unheard of. Seeing, he was losing money, or he was spending all of this money. Where was this money going? Who the hell knows? He had a certain lifestyle that he was not going to be able to sustain that, anymore. He had all of these family issues going on. And for me, it makes sense. And I know that a lot of people are like, that doesn't make sense, but you cannot rationalize the irrational. You have to just understand that the facts are what the facts are. They show what they show. And I think a lot of times people get so bogged down with, but like, why did he do that? Or what made him do that? Or how did that? I mean, I can't answer that question. He's the only one that can answer that question. But I do think it's a mixture of a lot of different things, but it's, wow. Yeah. I mean, it's just a crazy situation. It really, really
Amy
is.
Lawrence, I know you're chomping at the bit. What do you think it is, Amy? Why did he do it?
I've always had a different take on it than everybody else from the very beginning. I think that the turning point for him was his dad dying. They called and they said it was coming to an end. And I think they were very, very rich people. I think that I have this is absolutely not based in fact, only on gut, and usually my gut's right. So take that with a grain of salt. But I think that the reason he killed Paul and the reason he did it that night was because Paul needed to predecease him, his daddy.
Mm-hmm.
And his dad was going to die, and Paul had to die before him because of that way he could take his share of his inheritance, which would pay off all of his debts. That's what I think happened. I think there's a trust. And I think Paul dying is what made him take and inherit whatever money.
Do you think that Maggie was collateral damage?
Collateral damage. She was just there, and she wasn't supposed to be, like, necessarily. You know, she was there, and that just is what happened. Because
I mean, I gotta ask. I mean, this is almost a rhetorical question. Do you think there's ever a moment in time, Amy Lawrence Lovely, where Alex Murdaugh's lying on his steel bed, looking up at the bunk bed above him, thinking, wow, I can't believe I did something as horrible in life as murder my wife and son? You think he's ever, like, do you think he thinks about this?
I think Alex Murdaugh lives in his own reality. And he's probably talked himself out of even believing that he did it at this point. Wow. Because he's bought into his own bullshit. And that's like, it goes back to the sociopathic nature. It's like, this is the deal. Someone who really thought twice would have never done that to their child, right? Like, I can't even fathom, like, if I could, I would die for my kids. So I couldn't imagine hurting them, you know? And so, but that's the difference between him and I. I would never even think, I would want to take a bullet for my kid, not hurt. I can't even say it out loud. I could never hurt my child. You know, we all have this love for our children. Shit, I would do that for most children, not even just my own. I would take a bullet for. So I can't imagine hurting my own child. And so it's really hard to wrap my mind around him. Even I just don't think he has a conscience. I think that's beyond him. I hope he does. I hope he lays in bed and thinks like that. But that would mean, you know, that he had a heart. And I just don't think that he does. So
crazy to me. Blurry lights. Remember this question, Amy. We're coming right back to it. But is it significant that Chief Justice Kittredge wrote the state versus Green that you were talking about? This is really weedy stuff. But before you answer that, and I'm going to forget it, so remember it. Carm chiming in saying, I don't know if she's talking about me or Alex Murdaugh. He had a good mother. There you go. So what could have gone wrong? What about the Kittredge thing? Amy Zimmercheck.
So, I figured out the Supreme Court case. The United States Supreme Court case was Remmer. I knew it started with an R. And that was a 1945 case. So that case was around when Kittredge wrote that opinion. I think, I don't know. That's why I said I'm very fascinated to see how they distinguish that very unique issue about the burden. And the standard to apply to it. And so, you know, I mean, Justice Kittredge he's incredibly smart. I really, really, really like him. I do think that it's interesting that, you know, I mean, I think it's interesting that they chose who they chose to hear it, and that she applied the standard that was precedence in the state. And so, you know, I do think it's significant. I don't, you know, all of this to be said, what's really interesting is, you know, my case is still pending, and I was getting ready to plead my client, and now my case is still in the waiting too. So, you know, I think that the justices know that the ripples that their decision could have, and so, you know, I don't know what's going to happen, but I do think it's interesting that Kittredge is now the sitting chief and has decided to pull this single issue up to here.
Let's go backwards around the clock here to Sarah Ford. This is an interesting question, and I still have some stuff to get through on my end. But don't you think more people were involved? He had to be paying off a lot of people. I think his brothers are involved. Why did they go get the boat? They have money hidden. Sarah Ford, your response to this interesting question.
Yes. I mean, I do think that on some level, we don't have the whole story. You know, we don't know everything that happened. We don't know where the money's at. We don't know everyone who was involved. It stands to reason that, yeah, there's no way he could have done all the things he was doing by himself. There were other people involved, the drugs, the scheming, the financial stuff. There's a lot of people involved who have not been pulled into the criminal justice arena, and maybe they will someday.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think the truth will eventually come out?
I don't think that there's ever going to be a day that Alex Murdaugh is like, hello, I want to talk, and here's the truth. I don't think anyone would believe whatever he says, but I don't think he has it in him that he's going to say, I'm going to come quote unquote clean about this. So I think that there's a lot that we don't know. There's a lot that we don't understand. And I know that's hard for us to be okay with, but I don't think we're going to get there. I don't think we're going to get all of the answers. I really don't.
Amy Lawrence Lovely, do you think that one day Alex Murdaugh will do a tell-all with
Are we gonna get an OJ book? I didn't do it, but if I did, I would have done it like this.
Yeah,
maybe.
exactly.
Dude's got a lot of time on his hand. It could go either way. I don't know.
He needs the money. Maybe he's gonna write the book for the money. So there's a quote here that I came across, and this is from Christopher Adams, Charleston attorney. He's the former president of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. He's talking about this hearing. He says, the findings of fact by former Chief Justice Toll at the evidentiary hearing were significant findings of misconduct by the clerk of court as it relates to her interactions with the jury, he said. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. This is definitely not a frivolous appeal. This has a lot of substance with it. So, Sarah Ford, this kind of goes against what you're saying. So let me go to you about this comment. Do you think that this Christopher Adams guy is way off base?
I mean, Christopher Adams is entitled to his opinion. I disagree with him. I think that the facts that were supported by the evidence, not conjecture, not rumor, not innuendo, I think that Chief Justice Toll made the right call. I think that what the jurors testified to, had they answered their questions, the affidavits that were submitted, I think they were the one that they're basically relying on is completely unreliable and, kind of goes back and forth. It says one thing and then contradicts itself. So I think Becky Hill, not a great clerk of court, certainly not endorsing her for clerk of court of the year. And I'm not saying that her conduct was appropriate. I think it was not appropriate, but did it rise to the level that is required? I don't think it did. And I think that, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And that's okay too. But I think that the Supreme Court will support Justice Toll's ruling and will uphold this. And of course, we're still going to go through the Court of Appeals, the actual appeal. This is a very tiny, small thing in the whole scheme of things. So we'll see.
What's interesting.
Sorry, Amy. One second. Look, Carm is clarifying herself. I asked why he's so self-assured in prison. I was a little sarcastic since the mother's always blamed. She's saying that the mom was such a inspirational and loving mother that he has such great self-confidence. But Carm, so are you. And I've got some issues. But anyway, go ahead, Amy Zimmercheck.
So to what Sarah was saying, the other interesting part of this juror / Becky Hill issue, which I think is really underdeveloped and I think will be probably more developed during the regular appeal and the Court of Appeals, is you have to remember that there's the egg lady juror. I know that's what we call her. The egg lady juror was going to vote not guilty. Yes. She was very clear about that. She was not convinced. And Becky Hill single-handedly had that woman thrown off the jury. So yeah. I think that, and obviously the nature of the appeal issue that we had was directed towards the 12 sitting jurors. But I still think that can be expanded because, and one not guilty vote does not does not mean anything except for a new trial. It means a hung jury. And so I think that there's so many, like everything else in this case, there are so many layers to the different aspects. So, it'll be interesting, but also, again, I think the state's in a precarious position because I think if they bring any charges against Becky Hill that are related to this case, I think it undermines the case in general. And so they're in a rock and a hard place right now.
That's a super interesting and important point that I didn't think about. It's kind of like a catch-22. They probably want to slap her with charges, but if she's convicted, it makes the case stronger, like you said, for Harpootlian and Jim Griffin. So that's a super important point. There was one other thing with Alex Murdaugh, and then I do want to get to Becky Hill for a few minutes, and then we'll wrap it up. But Alex Murdaugh made it clear too that he's now appealing his federal sentencing. The motion that they filed said that it is quote unquote grossly disproportionate to the crimes committed. Sarah Ford, are they just going to laugh in his face here, or is there a legal argument to be made here?
I mean, there's always a legal argument to be made. I mean, whether it's a valid, substantial, and one that has any legs, absolutely not. I mean, he's lucky that's all he got, in my opinion. I mean, he was a true horrific, evil person to do what he did to those people, to those victims, these people who were the most vulnerable, the most dealing with the most tragic circumstances, and to exploit them with reckless abandon and just ruin their lives is just horrific. So I think that for him to say it is disproportionate is laughable. I think that they will laugh in a very dignified way and say, no, go back to jail. Go run your gambling ring. But I do think that, it's just more par for the Alex Murdaugh course. Like nothing about this has ever been simple. Nothing about this has been easy. Everything's been dramatic. Everything's been chaotic. Everything's been what's going to happen. It's been nuts the entire time. So, again, I think he's just doing this because he's got time on his hands. I mean, he can't fill all of his time with, playing cards and, hosting karaoke events. I mean, he's got to do some real work. So
those honey buns are worth it though. I'm not going to
honey buns. You know what that means.
I got to get Alex Murdaugh and Carm hooked up on a mahjong game. Carm doesn't know how to play that. That's like what all the old Jewish ladies in Florida play, but Carm hates it. Carm would never.
Well,
stoop
and he
to the
certainly
mahjong
entertains
level.
women writing him. So you might
Right?
want to be careful
Well,
with that.
That's the scary thing. Have we heard? Officially, is he getting tons of letters from women? Yeah, unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. Oh, a
That's
lot.
the word.
What's also interesting is that if you notice that, I mean, he's got to have some other way to communicate, because I know somebody recently tried to do a FOIA and he has no phone calls. Come on,
He's got a cell phone. Duh.
Would any of the three of you describe him as remotely attractive? Let me ask you that.
I'm not using
Let's move it along here. Madeline Bullitt.
He's very unfortunate looking.
Yeah. This is an interesting question, Sarah Ford. Makes you wonder exactly how many times Becky Hill has influenced juries in this small town. Maybe never before. This was a high-profile case, so shameful, but maybe she has. I mean, what's your gut tell you?
I mean, I think she'd only been clerk of court just one term, so she really hadn't been doing this that long. So, Madeline, I think it's probably very small. Hopefully, if this is in fact she influenced this jury, that it was just this one. But I think I love what Justice Toll said about her, is that it was just the allure of this, the lights and glitter of what she felt was like stardom. She was putting herself at the center of what is a murder trial where there are two victims that were tragically murdered at their home. And it's like, ooh, let me bring in cupcakes. Let's, chat about it. It was just very, very disrespectful. And in my estimation, her demeanor and a lot of these, things that she was talking about and places that she was. And then the book, like, don't even get me started on the book. I mean, that is just bad news bears overall. Like, why would you do that? That is,
and not only did she do that behind the doors of justice, but she then went on Good Morning America and on a whole, book tour with that. So
he was like, ooh, let me, put up my shirt. Like, I'm excited. Let me get my hair did. Like, no, that's not your place. You are an instrument of justice. You are a person who is there to help the court run more smoothly. If you're looking for lights and glitter and attention, then, go on The Golden Bachelorette, Becky. Not, don't be a clerk of court.
My thing is, y'all, can I say something real quick?
Yeah, please.
I think that she was very intentional with what she did. She knew what she was doing was wrong, which is why she didn't do it in front of the cameras. which is why she didn't do it in front of a judge. You know, when you're sneaking around and doing stuff, that tells you that it's not the right thing to do. And the thing is, it doesn't take a law degree to know that saying those things and doing the things that she did and the things that she said was not the right thing to do. And when you have to do it behind closed doors and not in front of everybody, then you should know that it's wrong. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that she knew exactly what she was doing. Now, was it because she, you know, the spotlight's got to be on somebody and it's real warm and she likes it on her or whatever? I don't know. Was the glitz and glamour too much for Daniel? Probably. But did she know that what she was doing was the wrong thing to do? It was contrary to the law. It was unethical and it was immoral. Absolutely have no doubt in my mind that she knew exactly what she was doing was wrong.
I have, and right here, New Jersey, Kathy, Becky Hill was acting like it was a sorority rush, but right before that, yeah, from misbelieving, she was experienced in the justice system and should have known better. So just to get to Becky Hill quickly, Murdaugh's defense team filed a motion for the Supreme Court, and they call her a literal wart on the legal system. For those who do not know, Becky Hill did resign back in March of 2024. Wasn't of her own volition. I mean, it was like she decided to resign, but she was definitely feeling the public pressure and really didn't have any other choice. She now faces 76 ethics violations, including using her office for personal growth. There's a public hearing scheduled for December. Sarah Ford, what does this mean? What's going to happen in December? This is not a trial. So what is this?
So the ethics complaints are not criminal complaints. Those are two separate things, separate and distinct. She was an elected official at the time, and it's my understanding that she even tried to get an ethics opinion about her writing this book and all of these different things. And she basically went against the advice that they gave her. So this is about, the book, her gaining, basically using her office to profit, doing things on the clock for Colleton County while she's clerk of court, but she's actually enriching herself. So I think it'll be very, very interesting to see what happens with that. I would expect, I think Amy Zimmercheck's made a really good point about the state. Are they going to bring charges against her while this is still going on with the Supreme Court? I don't know. They are in a really tough place, but I think ultimately her behavior, her actions were questionable at best. That's like the nicest thing I can say, and just disgusting at worst. So I'm interested to see what happens there. And, ultimately, I do think that charges are going to be brought against her. I do. When, I don't know.
And Amy Zimmercheck, kind of a theoretical question, but someone was asking, what are the potential sort of broader implications for South Carolina's judicial system if a new trial is granted, particularly concerning the integrity of kind of court processes and public trust? How could it would be, I guess, kind of a landmark decision to give this guy a new trial, but would it impact, you think, South Carolina in a legal way, in a profound way?
I mean, it should. It should, because South Carolina just has a history of doing things. We had it wasn't even that long ago, maybe 15 years or so. There was a case called Holmes v. South Carolina. So where the South Carolina was like, we don't want to talk about third-party guilt. You can't talk about, there were very limitations on what you can present. And the Supreme Court's like, no, South Carolina, you got it wrong. And sometimes with South Carolina, what I've seen is that when it's a case of bad facts, and this case is just a case full of bad facts all around, right? And the Supreme Court wants to uphold that conviction. Interestingly, I don't think a new trial would take 6 weeks. I think it would be a very differently tried case. I think it would be much smoother. There were egos driving this trial on both sides. Neither side was prepared. And I mean, you're getting evidence coming in the first week of trial, like the download from the cars and so they just quite honestly weren't prepared. I think that the defense thought that they would catch the state on their heels, and they didn't think about the state has the weight of the entire state they shut down the government and had every lawyer and every law enforcement working on this case alone. So the implications are like, I just want to reiterate what Amy, the beautiful Amy, said earlier, and that is that it's not about whether he's guilty or innocent. It's about the process. And that's what gets so lost. This case that I'm getting ready to try next week, I have definitive evidence that the state knows about, and they just want, because the victims are mad, or because people are mad and they just don't want to, deal with it. They just push things aside. And that's not what justice is about. Regardless of whether or not people are guilty or innocent, is it fair? And, I'm like soapbox right now, because my whole life I've been a criminal defense attorney. That's what I've done my whole career. And so it's natural for me to want to protect not necessarily murderers and rapists. And they're like, oh, how can you protect those people? No. I'm protecting all of us with those rights. And that's the point that I wish that people would really understand, is that, yeah, and I just don't think it would be another 6-week circus. I don't think it would be as disorganized as it was. And quite honestly, I don't think it would be as fascinating as it was the first time. But I do think that it's important that, and I do think he would be convicted, no doubt. But to just say, oh, well, if all that's going to happen anyway, then we'll just let it slide, because judges across the state are then making decisions on other cases. And they're like, oh, well, we'll just let it slide. And it's not going to show up in the news because, Joe Blow sitting in the jail in Orangeburg is not a lawyer. He's a 19-year-old kid, and so that's the part that is so important about this.
I agree. It's about the legal system and how it works, not about the guilt or innocence. And we're going to find out, I guess, soon enough. I'm personally sick of Alex Murdaugh and him getting all the attention. Amy, go ahead.
I have a question. Okay.
Please do.
Becky Hill is a word. Then what is Alex Murdaugh? What is he? What is he in the system?
A hemorrhoid?
Yeah. Okay. That's it. That's what he is. Okay.
Okay.
I was a fissure? Is that something? Isn't that something like even worse than like a hemorrhoid?
What's like the worst thing that would be
worse? Like it's bad.
Yeah, that's not the pot calling the kettle black. I don't know what it is,
y'all. A couple of minutes of fun before we go out here. If Murdaugh didn't kill his family, then who did? There's no other suspect and evidence which can prove his innocence. Then he did it. Second trial is nonsense, followed by this. Could Alec have witnessed a hit on his wife and son, sending him a message and perhaps enhance his funds he owed him? He can speak due to placing remaining family members in jeopardy. I mean, kind of, Sarah Ford, I don't know, your response to these two comments. I mean, you could speculate all day long, I guess.
No.
I think pre-trial, that made total sense. Post-trial, it doesn't make any sense.
I don't know. No, not at all.
Back to a serious note for a minute. By the way, tomorrow, the only time we can make work for everyone involved, 2:30 p.m., a lot of people who are watching us are very interested in the upcoming Donna Adelson trial. I'm going to be in Tallahassee, gavel to gavel for that live. But tomorrow, the Shanna Gardner case, if you don't know it, out of Jacksonville, is eerily similar. A woman married to a man. That woman and her husband, things go south. There's a custody issue. And what's this guy's name?
Busy.
Busy?
This is Busy.
Like Busy, or is there a South Carolina?
B-U-Z-Y. He's into everything.
Oh, I love it.
I spell it I-E, but yes.
Is that a Bichon Frise, or what is that thing? Maltese, close.
Yes.
What's up, Busy? I like that name. Do you ever call him Busy B?
Yes.
You do.
Biz man, Busy Bee, whatever. He comes just about anything. Sometimes I call him an a-hole because he runs down the street and goes into other people's homes doggy door.
I'd be calling him mind your business, Busy. Tomorrow's live 2:30. My point was Shanna Gardner and the Adelson family, a lot of things in common, eerily in common. And we're going to be breaking that down at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. And then after a 2-week break, Phil and Scott are back at 5 p.m. Eastern on Friday, assuming they still remember who I am. But on a serious note, Sarah Ford, have you heard anything about the Stephen Smith case? Where it stands? Are we ever going to get an answer on this?
That is such a sad situation. I know that a lot of people thought, with, his mom, getting new attorneys, new counsel, getting Eric Bland involved, that, it was really going to push SLED in the right direction. But, as far as I know, the investigation is quote unquote open. And, I work with a lot of victims, and when you get it's still open years after they just don't want to have that bad conversation with the family and say, hey, we've got nothing. We are not able to prosecute this case. We don't have the evidence. There's nothing we can do at this point. So no, I mean, I think that the sad part of this is that there was so much hope, I think, during all of the Alex Murdaugh stuff, that it did bring attention to this case. And it just, unfortunately, nothing has been, no fruitful evidence has come from this. I know they did the other autopsy, all of that stuff. And it just, I've not heard anything positive or anything new to come out of that investigation.
And his mom needs answers. That's a horrific story. Final question. Amy Zimmercheck, how would Alec pay for defense for a new trial?
Honey buns.
Honey buns? Is that what you said?
Honey buns.
Yeah.
Here's the thing is that, I mean, he's got no money. He's got, or he ain't got money that we're going to find. That's where, I think that's where we are. And I mean, Dick and Jim are been on the hook for this for a long time. And I think it's just a matter of, obviously he's not going to be able to hire anybody. They know this case so well. A lot of times the trial that I'm supposed to start on Monday has already been thrown out of court once, and that was in February. Unfortunately, I don't get paid twice to try this case again. And it's, it's just one of the aspects of criminal law. I mean, they could certainly walk away and appoint public defenders, but I think that Dick and Jim are certainly invested and tied with this. I've spoken with Jim a lot. Jim is he's a good friend of mine, and he's a really good attorney, and and it's just tough. But the answer is, I don't think he's going to pay for any more trials.
Yeah. What about this one, Sarah Ford? Do you think this was Dick Harpootlian's last case? Does he go off into this? No
way. I mean,
no?
Unfortunately for him, he lost his reelection in the South Carolina Senate. So, I mean, he's going to need a microphone someplace. And I think that he's going to find it outside of a courtroom with a press conference. So I think that maybe we'll start seeing Dick more now that he's not going to be in session. So now
Dick Harpootlian is a machine. Okay.
Yeah.
And that man makes money, not just money. He makes all the monies. Like, he pluralizes money. Okay. He makes all the monies. So don't you be fooled. We have not seen the end of Dick Harpootlian. He will be back and getting some kind of crazy, huge verdict somewhere. It might not be criminal, but it will definitely be civil or a big settlement of some sort.
Some people, as I've learned in life, are good at that. That is not my strength, but good for Dick Harpootlian. Jimmy McNutty, another question. They're all flying in here. Zimmercheck, can Alec go pro se? Can he defend himself since he's an attorney? Would that be an absolute?
I mean, he doesn't even have to be an attorney to defend himself. But the old adage is, a lawyer who represents himself has a fool for a client. And I can tell you that he tried to drive a lot of this and combat with his attorneys on when they thought things should be done and how things should be done and what should be done. But I do think that he's got that, that little bit much of information to know better than to try to do that.
For those who do not know, Amy Zimmercheck is the owner of AJZ Law Firm. She focuses on criminal defense. She's got a murder case coming up this Monday. She is the real deal. Just your final thought as we head out, Amy. Where does this wind up? Will it be upheld, or will there be a new trial?
I pray that a new trial is done for the right reasons. I still think he'll be convicted, but I just think it's better for the system and for the little guys like me to have it done the right way.
I can't imagine the media circus again for that, but I don't think it would be nearly as massive as the last time. Aslan says, glad to have a panel without blokes. That means without dudes. So I agree. It's a nice change. Amy Lawrence Lovely. She fights for the civil rights of the wrongfully accused every day. All around great human being. Good mom. Got to if you're a good mom, that could be a problem later in life, as we found out with Alex Murdaugh and me. Amy Lawrence Lovely. Does it get upheld? New trial? Your final thoughts?
I think it'll get upheld, but for all the wrong reasons, maybe. I don't think that we're going to get it. I think they're going to do everything they can to uphold it, because they want to. He's more than the wart. He's the STD, as someone put in there in the chat, which I love seeing. It was funny. And they just, they want to put him to bed. They want to get rid of him, which I totally get. But I hope that I'm with Amy Z on this, for the integrity of the system. Because if that guy can't get a fair shake, then there's no hope for everybody else. Also, shout out to my kid. He made the football team. He just found out. He came in to tell me. Got all
Congrats.
excited.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Michael Dominguez, 11 jurors said they never heard the clerk say what is alleged by one juror. Can the justice system investigate the one of 11 jurors to see if her claim is legit? It does not smell right. For those who do not know, Sarah Ford has served as legal director at the South Carolina Victim Assistance Network since 2017. She leads a team of attorneys and advocates. She does good in the world. And she's a podcast host when she's not too busy. But what about this question here? And then your final thoughts.
Yeah, cosign, Michael. I mean, I agree with you. I think that, the evidence that was presented, it did not meet the standard. I think that it was not reliable. The juror Z, or whatever the juror's number was or letter was, I think that it will be upheld. I think that, we do have, obviously there's an interest in there being a fair trial, everything being done properly. I think that, this particular issue is not where he will find success. I think that this will be upheld. I think he'll go through the regular appellate process with the Court of Appeals, maybe, I'm sure, up to the South Carolina Supreme Court and, beyond. This is not the last that we're probably going to sit here and talk about Alex Murdaugh. Unfortunately, I think that he's going to be around for a while. I just don't think this is going to be the issue where he's going to be successful in starting over.
Amy, congrats. My son plays too. Another chapter of reality out of the Joel Carm playbook. Today, I was talking to Carm on the phone. People accuse us of making all our banter up, but we don't, because earlier we were on the phone and I was explaining to my mom that my oldest daughter wants to try to make the basketball team. 15 girls try out, only 12 make it. And I said, what if she's one of the 3 that doesn't make it? And my mother's response was, I would be so happy and so proud, because it means she has my genes. So that's where that led. But Vita, you will make it, because I will roll out that basketball hoop we have, and I will practice with you through December. These girls are cutthroat in this school, if any of the parents are watching, but I will have her ready for those tryouts. That's all I can say. Ned Smith is fixated with Peter Tragos, the lawyer you know. I don't know what this means. The lawyer you know and want to marry. You want to marry him? Is that what you're telling us? Ned Smith is a character. Oh, look at this. Jimmy McNutty. He's got my back. He's the trial watcher. There's no way Joel makes up all the profanity in the STS book. Carm is legit potty mouth, and we love it. She's got a tendency at times. It's usually when I irritate her. On that beautiful note, Carm is going to be all worked up. Love you, America. Love you, South Carolina, the Palmetto State. Don't love you so much, Alex Murdaugh. Alex Murdaugh, if you're watching this on your tablet in prison, why don't you think about what you did tonight for a couple of minutes, and also realize that these 3 beautiful women think that you're whatever is worse than a wart. How's that? Tomorrow, 2:30, Shanna Gardner. Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. It's back to Great Scott at your True Crime Bill with Bill Waters, the legendary detective, and Scott Duffy of the FBI. See you tomorrow, everybody.